Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Arindam Ghosh, an assistant professor in the Department of English, Krishna Chandra College, Hetampur, Birbhum. In this lecture, I will talk about Louis Althusser. This is perhaps my ninth lecture on Marxist thought, and in the previous lecture, I have discussed about Benjamin, Herbert Marcuse, and Adorno's thinking, Frankfurt School's thinking, and in this present lecture I will start talking about Louis Althusser's structural Marxism and how it influenced the contemporary Marxist thinking and changed the paradigm of the Marxist thinking completely. So Althusser was a French Marxist philosopher born in Algeria, much like Derrida, studied at one of the most prestigious educational institutions of France, École Normale Supérieure in Paris. They say that it's an institution that produces some of the greatest philosophers of all time, and where he eventually became the professor of philosophy there. Althusser has a checkered career. He was a long-time member of the Communist Party of the France, but his arguments and the thesis were set against the threats that he saw attacking the theoretical foundations of Marxism. At the same time, he radically also criticized the French Communist Party. So in him we can see actually some of the humanist and reformist influences, some of the structural influences, where he saw Marxism almost as a system, and generally he has been termed after as the structural Marxist, but he himself actually criticized French structuralism to a great extent, and this equation between him with a structural Marxist is not a very simplified affiliation, but he himself was very much critical about the many aspects of structuralism. So Althusser's life was marked with various intense period of mental illness, and in 1980 he killed his own wife, sociologist Helen Richtman, by strangling her, and he died around 1990. There are various famous publications of Louis Althusser. For example, his most famous publication is actually Reading Capital, this particular book, and of course Lenin and Philosophy. It is another famous book, and For Marx is actually also an example of another famous book by Louis Althusser. Now moving into the idea of Louis Althusser, we must at first talk about his own conception of ideology. Now Althusser had seen actually ideology completely from a different perspective that Marx and other thinkers have seen. Now we have to talk about this thing, how Althusser visualizes ideology. So talking about ideology, Marx says that ideology is basically false consciousness. It's basically a kind of masking, a distortion, or a kind of concealment. Through the ideology, the way some cultural texts and practices present and distort the images of reality. So according to Marx, ideology is basically the ruling ideas of the ruling class, the dominant ideology of the ruling class, through which they control the society. Ideology can best be equated with the word discourse that was formed much more later by Michel Foucault. So ideology is basically more or less a reflection of the material infrastructure propounded by the ruling class. It's generally equated with the conception of the false consciousness, এক ধরনের ভুল চেতনা যেটা জনমানুষের মধ্যে, বিশেষ করে প্রলেটারিয়াতদের মধ্যেকার সর্বহারা, তাদের মধ্যে যারা ক্যাপিটালিস্ট, যারা পুঁজিবাদী, তারা ইনজেক্ট করে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করছে, ভেতরে ঢুকিয়ে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করছে। But Althusser said that ideology is basically a game of representation of the imaginary relationship of the individuals to their real conditions of existence. So, Althusser said, why not just understand the real? Because ideology represented to us an imaginary condition. So the real economic condition actually means exploitation, suppression, oppression and alienation. While ideology is the mask, the concealment, it's almost like a painkiller. It gives us some illusory representation. Just like a painkiller. যেরকম যন্ত্রণা হওয়ার ওষুধ আমাদেরকে সেই মুহূর্তে খানিকটা হলো রিলিফ দেয়, ideology is just like that. These things give us pleasure, release tensions, but ultimately they return us to the place in the social order. Ultimately, the haunting repetition of trauma, of wound, actually, and pain returns. So Louis Althusser actually divided the state machinery, the ideology, into two forms. One is the repressive state apparatus, and another is the ideological state apparatus. What is repressive state apparatus? Repressive institutions, for example, army, police, school, colleges, universities, hospital, they are all visible repressive state institutions. While there are also various ideological institutions, ideological state apparatuses. For example, television, for example, newspaper, for example, novels, literature, work of art, drama, and the ideological state apparatus also can be subdivided into imaginary and material again. So, while the repressive state apparatus will eventually involve a kind of force and coercion, on the other hand, the ideological state apparatus will eventually involve the brainwashing. So, Marxists see the state as the means by which the capitalist ruling class maintain their dominant position. Althusser argues the state consists of the two elements. He calls these apparatuses. One is actually through the force, the repressive state apparatus, and another is through the ideology. So, in order to advance the theory of the state, it is indispensable for us to take into the account of the distinction between the state power and the state apparatus. What is the difference between the state power and the state apparatus? As I have already said, that the repressive mechanism are the state power, while state apparatus are basically ideological formations. So, these ideological state apparatuses must not be confused with the repressive state apparatus. And in Marxist theory, the state apparatus or SA contains the government, the administration, the army, the police, the court, the prison house, etc. They are all repressive state functionaries. Repressive suggests that the state apparatus in question functions by violence. Very important word. Repressive state apparatus means where the machineries functions by violence, force মাধ্যমে জোর করে প্রতিহিংসার মাধ্যমে গায়ের বল প্রয়োগ করে যে সমস্ত অ্যাপারেটাস কাজ করে তাকে বলে রিপ্রেসিভ স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাস। যখনই মানুষের ব্রেন নিয়ে খেলে, যখনই ব্রেন ওয়াশ করার চেষ্টা করে, তুমি বুঝতেও পারবে না কখন তোমার মধ্যে ডমিনেন্ট ইডিওলজি অফ দ্য রুলিং ক্লাস তোমার মধ্যে ইনজেক্ট করে দেওয়া হয়েছে। দ্যাট ইজ ইডিওলজিক্যাল স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাস। So, ideological state apparatus, a certain number of realities which present themselves to the immediate observer in the form of distinct and specialized institutions. So, we can divide ideological state apparatuses into various domains. For example, the religious ISA. What is the religious ISA? The institution of church, the temple, etc. Educational ISA, the system of different public and private school, universities, colleges. The family ISA, your uncle, your mother, your father, through which specific form of ideology has been inculcated inside your family, that is family ISA. Political ISA, the political system including different parties, trade unionist ISA. Ideological state apparatus formed through various trade unions, and of course, very important, the communications ISA. Press, radio, television, YouTube, social media, and cultural ISA like literature, the arts, sports, etc. So Althusser said that the ISS must not be confused with the repressive state apparatus. So what constitutes the difference? Where is the difference? At the first moment, it is clear that while there is one repressive state apparatus, there is plurality in the ideological state apparatus. Even presupposing that it exists, the unity that constitutes this plurality of ISs as a body is not immediately visible. But in the second moment, it is clear that whereas the repressive state apparatus is unified because we can easily recognize it as repressive state apparatus, unified because you can see that that executive is basically a part of the administration, that sometimes judiciary is acting as part of the government. We can sometimes recognize this, but ideological state apparatus are much more subterranean, they are much more subliminal, and hence they are much more dangerous. As I have already said, the state apparatus, repressive state apparatus follows functions by violence, whereas the ideological state apparatus function by ideology. So here are some of the basic difference between the ideological state apparatus and the repressive state apparatus. For example, the family and the police, they are also sometimes function by ideology, both to ensure their own cohesion and reproduction, but and in the values they propound externally. Police also sometimes operates through various forms of ideologies. Police বিভিন্ন ধরনের সামাজিক ধরনের কাজ করে। ফর এক্সাম্পল, জঙ্গলমহলে পুলিশ অনেক সময়ই ফুটবল খেলার আয়োজন করে, যার থ্রু দিয়ে তারা একটা ইউনিফাইড সিস্টেম অফ মেকানিজম তৈরি করার চেষ্টা করে। কিন্তু এই পুলিশের যে মানে তার যে ইডিওলজি, তার মাঝখানেও অনেক ধরনের ফাঁক থেকে যায়, যেগুলো দিয়ে সরকার অনেক সময় পুলিশকে ব্যবহার করে। সো ideological state apparatuses function massively and predominantly by ideology, but they also function secondarily by repression. There is no such thing as a purely ideological state apparatus. For example, schools and churches use suitable methods of punishment like expulsion, selection, etc. to discipline. So the same is true in case of the family. Moving into my next slide. So here is an example, a difference between one repressive state apparatus and another ideological state apparatus. For example, prison house and school. School is an ideological state apparatus, we all know about it, and prison is a repressive state apparatus. So school is an authoritarian structure, prison is also an authoritarian structure. In the school we can see a certain amount of dress code. In the prison we also can't see it. For the first time, Michel Foucault, one of the greatest post-structuralist thinker in France, he talked about this form of disciplinary mechanisms. He said this in his famous book Discipline and Punish, The Birth of a Prison. So Foucault said in the Discipline and Punish that there is actually perhaps there lies very less difference between a school and a prison house on the grounds that both are basically structures of the dominant ideological, both are dominant structures created by the dominant ideology. Both the structures has been created to propound the ideology of the government. So both encourages negative reinforcement, both encourages a loss of the individual autonomy in both the spheres occur there, abridged freedoms, no input in decision making, set time enforced for waking, eating, etc. Set time enforced for waking and eating in the prison house also occurs as well. So Michel Foucault said that schools serve the same social functions as prisons and mental institutions to define, classify, control and regulate people. Rabindranath Tagore also compared school education with prison, asylum and so on. While Tagore said যে শিক্ষাকে দেওয়াল দিয়া ঘিরিয়া গেট দিয়া রুদ্ধ করিয়া দারোয়ান দিয়া পাহারা বসাইয়া শাস্তি দ্বারা কণ্টকিত করিয়া ঘণ্টা দ্বারা তাড়া দিয়া মানব জীবনের আরম্ভে একই নিরানন্দের সৃষ্টি করা হইয়াছে। প্রচলিত দণ্ডরীতি রবীন্দ্র রচনাবলী, যেখানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ পাঠশালাকে, পাগলাগারদকে এবং প্রিজন হাউসকে, জেলখানাকে প্রায় একটা প্যারাডাইম নিয়ে দিচ্ছে। তাহলে বুঝতে পারছো, দেয়ার লাইজ পারহ্যাপস no such difference between the ideological state apparatus in its main functionary and the repressive state apparatus. কিন্তু রিপ্রেসিভ স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাস এমন একটা জিনিস যেটা তোমরা ইজিলি আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পারছো, কিন্তু ইডিওলজিক্যাল স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাস এমন একটা জিনিস যেটা তোমরা ইজিলি আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পারছো না। তাহলে এইভাবেই অ্যালথুজারিয়ান কনসেপশন অফ স্টেট মেশিনারি এই ইডিওলজিক্যাল স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাসকে নগ্ন করেছেন। তিনি দেখিয়েছেন যে ইডিওলজিক্যাল স্টেট অ্যাপারেটাসের কি কি ভুল দিক থাকতে পারে। অ্যান্ড হেন্স হি টকস অ্যাবাউট the restructuring of the Marxist formula. How the restructuring is happening here? Marx said that the economic base and the cultural and the political superstructure are the two separate domains. Base is influencing the superstructure, but not the way not the reverse way around. But in Althusserian conception, the base is influencing the superstructure. At the same time, superstructure is also maintaining the base. So superstructure maintains the base, and of course base is shaping the superstructure. So these ideological and repressive state machineries are contained in the superstructure, which is greatly influencing the social relations of production, which is greatly influencing the material forces of production. So no class can hold state power over a long period without at the same time exercising its hegemony over and in the state ideological apparatus. So without controlling the cultural sphere, without controlling the ideological state apparatus through school, universities, colleges, and various other cultural institutions like literature and drama, a government will not be able to control its politics. সেজন্যই এই গভর্নেন্সের ক্ষেত্রে কেন বুদ্ধিজীবী টার্মটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট হয়ে যায় তোমরা নিশ্চয়ই বুঝতে পারছো। কেন প্রত্যেকটা গভর্নমেন্টই বুদ্ধিজীবীদের নিয়ন্ত্রণ করতে চায়। সো Lenin's, be it the government at the time of the Second World War, the Nazi and the fascist government, they always tried to control the people through these, they control the intelligentsia through propounding these state machineries. So Lenin's anguished concern to revolutionize the educational ideological state apparatus simply to make it possible for the Soviet proletariat who had seized the state power to secure the future of the dictatorship of the proletariat and the transition to socialism. So moving on to the next slide. So ideology becomes basically a material practice, and examples of the material practice that reflect the ideology, for example taking summer holidays, giving gifts to the occasion. কিন্তু তোমরা প্রত্যেকটা তোমাদের জীবনে করো। সামার হলিডে একটা রিচুয়ালের মতো না, ইটস এ মেটেরিয়াল প্র্যাকটিস। ফর এক্সাম্পল কাউকে কোনো একটা জন্মদিনে গিফট দাও, এগুলো তোমাদের জীবনের প্রত্যেকটা প্রক্রিয়ার মধ্যে ঢুকে পড়েছে। তো এইটাও কিন্তু is an ideological practice. You are conforming to a certain ideology. So there is always an inscription of the material in ideology. What are the four inscriptions of the material? Material means material rituals, যেগুলো তোমরা প্রত্যেকদিন করছো, যে রিচুয়ালগুলোকে ছোঁয়া যায়, যে রিচুয়ালগুলো কংক্রিট। ফর এক্সাম্পল modalities, the materiality of a displacement for going to mass or kneeling down, of the gesture of the sign of the cross, of a sentence of a prayer, an act of contrition, penitence. When you are going to a mass, তুমি যখন চার্চে গেছো তোমাকে মাসে যেতে হবে, তোমাকে প্রেয়ারে নীল ডাউন হয়ে বসতে হবে। These all rituals are part of the modalities. For example, survive, the term subject consciousness, belief, actions. These are another part of the material inscription of ideology. Appear terms like practices, rituals, ideological apparatus, they must appear and they must survive. Which term will disappear? The term ideas. Idea ke disappear korte hobe. Karon bhabna, je kono dhoroner bhabna khubi dangerous. Ideology is always dangerous. So there is no practice except by, and in an ideology there is no ideology except by the subject and for the subjects. So from this, Althusser created the very important word called interpolation. This is actually in your syllabus. Interpolation. What is interpolation? Interpolation actually is hailing from the conception of the ideology. It means when the state machinery are no longer considering you as individuals, but you are a subject according to the state machinery. And for example, if you are a student, you live by certain rules. For example, if you are a police officer, you are living by certain rules. For example, if you are a professor, you are living by certain rules. এভাবে সমাজ যখন তোমাকে not as an individual subject হিসেবে দেখে, but as a subject with certain abiding certain rules, সে হিসেবে যখন দেখে, there occurs interpolation. Actually, Althusser himself cited interpolation as an example when you are not abiding the traffic laws, for example, and another police officer is actually asking you, hey, where are you going? You turn back to the police officer in utterly surprised manner, and hence you are interpelling, you are participating inside a process of interpolation. তুমি হয়তো কোনো রুলস অ্যান্ড রেগুলেশনস অফ দ্য ট্রাফিককে অমান্য করনি, কিন্তু পুলিশ অফিসার তোমাকে ডাকলো, বা কোনো একজন অথরিটেরিয়ান পজিশনে থাকা কেউ একজন তোমায় ডাকলে তুমি সাড়া দিতে বাধ্য। এই যে ডিসিপ্লিন, এই যে কনসেপশন অফ দ্য ডিসিপ্লিন তোমার মাইন্ডের মধ্যে প্রডিউস করেছে সোসাইটি, যে জিনিসটা তুমি মেনে চলতে বাধ্য হচ্ছ সবসময়, এইটা Althusser called it as interpolation. So interpolation is the process by which ideological systems call out to social subjects and tell them their place in the system. If you are a student, you have to maintain certain decorums in the society, certain rules and regulations. In the popular culture, it refers to the ways that popular cultural products address their consumers and recruit them into a particular ideological position. So interpolation is a concept in Marxist social and political theory associated with particularly with the work of the philosopher of Louis Althusser. So interpolation draws to the theory the notion of the fully autonomous and coherent actualized human subject is an illusion. That fully actualized and automatic human subject is not possible, কারণ রাষ্ট্র সবসময় কোনো না কোনো ভাবে তাকে নিয়ন্ত্রণ করবে। So ideology, according to Althusser, is the imaginary relation of those individuals to the real relations in which they live. Ideology only corresponds to a betrayal of reality by science. Ideology creates simulation. Simulation means that which is not real. Real simulation মানে তোমাকে একটা জাস্ট একটা ইলিউশনারি এনভায়রনমেন্টের মধ্যে রাখছে, এটা রিয়েল বাট ইট ইজ নট রিয়েল। Simulation corresponds to a short circuit of the reality and to its reduplication by science. For example, when you are playing video games, it is a simulated reality. It is not a real atmosphere. It has been created by various animation artists. It's not a real world. It's an illusory world. So ideology creates an atmosphere of simulation and illusion. And this is ultimately why power is so in accord with ideological discourses. And discourses on ideology, for these are all discourses of truth. Always good, even and especially if they are revolutionary to counter the mortal blows of the simulation. So sometimes a Marxist thinker is saying that sometimes all the discourses, these are all discourses of truth. It appears as truth, but they are not truth. especially if they are revolutionary to counter the mortal blows of simulation, especially if force করে যদি revolutionary হয়। আমরা দেখেছি ইনফ্যাক্ট ইন কেস অফ দ্য লেনিন, স্ট্যালিন এন্ড আদার্স কিরকম ভাবে তারা কাউন্টার রেভলিউশনারি ফোর্সকে এনকাউন্টার করেছেন এবং ডিস্ট্রয় করে দিয়েছেন ফর দেয়ার ওন সেক অফ autocratic governance. Some of the proclaimed Marxists, they are some of the greatest Marxists, they themselves call them Marxist, but they have destroyed the foundations of Marxism, which talks about essentially emancipation and liberty. সেই ইনস্টিটিউশনগুলোকে তারা নষ্ট করে দিয়েছেন। ফলে পাওয়ার অ্যান্ড ইডিওলজি ইজ এসেনশিয়ালি ডেঞ্জারাস টুল। সব সময়ই কোনো রেভলিউশনারি চিন্তাভাবনা, কোনো রেভলিউশনারি আইডিয়া হলে তাকে ধ্বংস করার চেষ্টা করে এই ক্ষমতা। সো তার কথাই বলেছেন Althusser. We will remember Althusser for coining two very important terminologies. One is ISA, ideological state apparatus, and the influence of the ideological state apparatus in various domains like family, religious institution, in schools, in colleges, in universities, and of course interpolation. Interpolation is the thing through which a state do not give recognition to your autonomy as subject. They will call you and eventually will tell you to do certain things. That's the main ideological foundation behind interpolation. So ideology hails or interpellates individuals as subjects, because ideology is eternal, and ideology has already interpellated individuals as subjects, which amounts to making it clear that individuals are always already interpellated by the ideology as subjects, which necessarily leads us to one last proposition, that individuals are always already subjects. A very important word by Louis Althusser, that individuals are always already subjects. তুমি প্রথম থেকেই সাবজেক্ট হয়ে জন্মেছো, তুমি প্রথম থেকেই রাষ্ট্রের মেশিনারির কাছে সারেন্ডার করতে বাধ্য, because you don't have any options left. Hence the conception of the individual is abstract with respect to the subject, because they are always already subjects. এখানে এই ব্যাপারটা থেকেই আমরা বলতে পারি there is a connection of Althusser with structuralism, because structuralism says that language is essentially a part of the system, and hence as you are pronouncing and practicing and uttering language, you are always already subject, because language is a state discourse, language is a discourse of the power, language is a discourse of the authority, and hence as you are conforming to language, you are always already subjects. So Michel Foucault's notion of the Marxist power and ideology, Foucault studied under Louis Althusser, an influential Marxist thinker who examined the way social systems control the human subjects, and Foucault and of course the influence of Althusser can be felt in Foucault in a great way, and in fact we can quote some of the Michel Foucault's quotation while studying Althusser, because Foucault was a post-Marxist, we can call. He was a virulent critic of Marxism, and we can find a great deal of similarity between Foucauldian thinking and Althusserian thinking. Foucault, we can pronounce it as Foucault, not Foucault. Foucault argues in a number of points in relation to the power, that power is not an institution and not a structure either. Neither is it a certain strength we are endowed with. It is the name that one attributes to a complex strategically situation in a particular society. So power is not a thing, power is not an object, power is an abstract entity. It cannot be felt. আমি বলতে পারি না যে 3 কিলো ক্ষমতা আছে আমার। Power can be expressed only through relations. It's a wave. It's basically wave of power relations. আমার এতটাই ক্ষমতা যে আমি একটা ফোন করে দিলাম, তোমার কাজটা হয়ে গেল। সো পাওয়ার একজনের থেকে উদ্ভূত হয় না, নেটওয়ার্ক অফ সিস্টেম থেকে পাওয়ার হয়। গভর্নেন্সের পাওয়ার, গভর্নমেন্ট, এনি গভর্নমেন্ট ইন দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড is powerful, because they have both the repressive state apparatus as well as the ideological state apparatus. তাদের রাষ্ট্রের হাতে সব কিছু রয়েছে, নিউজ পেপার রয়েছে, রাষ্ট্রের হাতে স্কুল, কলেজেস, ইউনিভার্সিটিস যদি চায়। আমাদের ভারতবর্ষে হয়তো সেটা একেবারেই হয় না বলেই, কারণ এত ডাইভার্সিটি, হয় না বলেই হয়তো আমাদের ভারতবর্ষে এত গভর্নমেন্ট এসছে, এত কিছু চেঞ্জ হয়েছে, সত্ত্বেও ভারতবর্ষের ডেমোক্রেসি অ্যাকচুয়ালি সার্ভাইভ বিকজ অফ সাচ আ কমপ্লেক্সিটি অফ দ্য পাওয়ার রিলেশনস, যে অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই কোনো না কোনো একটা পকেটস অফ রেজিস্ট্যান্সে এই ভয়ঙ্কর ধরনের পাওয়ার রিলেশনসকে রেজিস্ট করতে পারে। সো পাওয়ার অপারেটস at the most micro levels of social relations. Power is omnipresent at every level of the social body. So power is not simply a property of the state. Power is not something that is exclusively localized in government and the state, but rather power is exercised throughout various social bodies. এই প্রসঙ্গে ফুকোর প্রচুর কোটেশন হয়েছে। From Anti-Oedipus we can say power is not simply repressive but it is productive. Power produces, কেন সেটা পরবর্তীকালে যখন ফুকো নিয়ে আলোচনা করবো বলবো। Where there is power there is resistance. ক্ষমতা থাকলে তার বিপক্ষে দাঁড়াবার ভয়েসও তৈরি হবে, ক্ষমতা থাকলে রেজিস্ট্যান্সও তৈরি হবে। There is no glory in punishing, says the history of sexuality. So its function, power is to punish, is not essentially different from that of curing and educating. So power, medical institution through the law, through the এডুকেশনাল ইনস্টিটিউশনের থ্রু দিয়ে সব কিছু দিয়ে রিফ্লেক্টেড হয়। আমরা পাওয়ারকে বিভিন্ন ভাগে ভাগ করতে পারি। ডিসিপ্লিনারি পাওয়ার, সভরেন পাওয়ার, পাওয়ার অফ দ্য স্টেট, ডিসিপ্লিনারি পাওয়ার ফর এক্সাম্পল টু মেক ইউ ডিসিপ্লিন সিটিজেন অফ দ্য সোসাইটি, যেটা স্কুল, কলেজ, ইউনিভার্সিটি করে। বায়ো পাওয়ার, বাই ইনভেন্টিং ভেরিয়াস ফর্মস অফ মেডিসিনস। প্যাস্টোরাল পাওয়ার, এগ্রিকালচারাল মেশিনারি ক্রিয়েট করে। পাওয়ার সব জায়গায় অপারেট করছে। In the next class, we'll move into perhaps the last section, the 9th lecture of my Marxist literary theory class. I'll talk about Frederick Jameson, vigorous, virulent critic of the postmodernist thought. I'll talk about Jacques Derrida's book, to some extent Raymond Williams and Terry Eagleton. So thank you. And I'll also talk about how literature can be read through the lens of the Marxist criticism. See you in the next class. Today I have ended Louis Althusser. Thank you.